Hi, I'm Pastor Andrew McGregor from Grande, Prairie Alliance Church. Welcome to our YouTube channel today. As you engage with this sermon, I pray that the God who loves you would meet with you in meaningful and significant ways. I want to encourage you to lean in to the extent possible, with a heart posture that's open to receiving from God whatever it is that He wants to say to you or do in your life today. As a church, we care about you. We want to continue to see you flourish and thrive. And so we'd love to receive you in person at the church campus whenever you'd like to come, but also feel free to engage with us here on our YouTube channel or on our website at gpalliance.ca.
So my question for you this morning is, what are some of the hardest things that you have ever done? Again, maybe when you think about the hardest things you've ever done, maybe it was running a really hard and challenging race. Maybe it was doing a really difficult test in school. Maybe it was standing up to someone who was doing something evil and destructive and telling them they couldn't do it anymore. Or maybe when you think about the most challenging circumstances that you've walked through, maybe it wasn't so much one particular challenging incident, but maybe it was persevering. Maybe it was stepping in and day out, continuing to do the things that you knew God was calling you to do, to be the person that you knew God was calling you to be. Maybe it was faithfully navigating a marriage struggle, or a challenge in your family, or some difficulty with your health. Maybe it was something at your work, or something in your friendships, or relationship, or broader society, or just a really tough season in your mental or emotional health. Again, none of us like dark, challenging, painful, difficult things because we just want everything to be as easy as is humanly possible. And in our passage today, the Apostle James is encouraging and challenging us to persevere through hard things, holding on to Jesus well. Again, as you know, we've been walking together through James over the course of the summer. Last week, Pastor Matt led us beautifully through a passage about how we continue to surrender our financial reality into the presence and the person of God, how we live authentically with Him and everything continuing to pursue Him. And today we want to pick up where we left off last week in James chapter 5, beginning in verse 7. And so what I'm going to get you to do, because you might have been sitting for a little bit of time, and some of you look a little drowsy, what I'm going to get you to do is to read it with me in sections. So the people in these two sections, would you stand with me and read the first part, and we'll go on from there, and we'll see maybe who's the best. We'll kind of go from there. All right, so I'm going to get you guys over here to stand up with me, and we'll read the first section. Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Thank you. You guys were awesome. Good job. You can have a seat. All right, the people in these two sections, would you stand with me and read the next section with me as well? And see if you can do it better than them. Let's go from there. Brothers and sisters, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we counted as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Awesome. Thank you. You guys can sit down. That's that right. Good job. You guys rocked it. You were amazing. All right, in the final section, you guys, see if you can outdo those two guys over there, a little smaller crowd on this side, but just see if you can give it all you've got. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no. Otherwise, you'll be condemned. Awesome. Thank you. You guys were great as well. Again, overall in this passage, what James is saying to us is we need to persevere through hard and challenging and difficult times to continue to pursue God well. But there's a bit of a gap between where James is starting and where we often start in our culture with this particular passage. Again, James is beginning from a standpoint where he assumes everyone reading this letter has come to the place of maturity where they've said, I will follow Jesus no matter what it costs. I understand that He is Lord and God and worthy of every part of me, and no matter what it takes, I want to honor Him, I want to serve Him, I want to pursue Him faithfully and well, whatever the journey looks like. And this is challenging for us in our culture, because in our culture, comfort and safety are our highest values. And when comfort and safety come into direct conflict with a relationship with Jesus and following Him through a challenging season, we will often tend to say, I'm totally in with Jesus, but if it's going to cost me something, I want the chance to reevaluate, to decide how far I'm going to go in these moments. And again, James could not imagine that kind of a reality. And so if today you're in that place where you haven't yet committed yourself fully and unconditionally to Jesus, there's going to be some bits that feel like there's a bit of friction and you're not sure why James doesn't just suggest something else. So giving you that warning, there is this bit of a gap as we engage this passage together. But James starts off with one of our least favorite concepts: patience. He begins by saying, "Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near." Okay, so in the room, show of hands, who loves to be patient? Anybody just like, I can't wait? Again, for the kids in the room, in those moments where your parents say to you, you have to wait for dessert. You can't have that treat until after you eat your vegetables. Who just loves that? Probably not too many of us. Again, for all of us in the room, how do we handle it when we have to wait for something we really want? How do you handle it when the Wi-Fi is slow or maybe goes out? How do you handle it when you're stuck in traffic? Or when the person in the store checkout in front of you is just taking forever? Do you just say, "Oh, this is a gift. I could choose to be patient in this moment"? Again, we don't like being patient. It's a really challenging concept. And James recognized the church he was writing to was journeying through a hard, a painful, a challenging season, and they just wanted to get through it. They just wanted Jesus to come in fullness of his power and glory to end this world and to bring in the fullness of the next so that everything would be set right. And so James says to them, I want you to remember what a farmer is like. Farmers always trust that the harvest will come. Whether it's a great harvest or a poor harvest, it will be there. And so they're able to be patient, to do the work. They don't harvest the crop before it's ready because they know that one day it will be ready and it will come. And James is saying if farmers can do this regularly because they know the seasons of the year, how much more can we choose to be patient? Because we know the wonder and the goodness and the character of God. We know that God Almighty is present with us. He is moving and active and working in each and every one of our situations. We know that ultimately He will bring everything together exactly as it ought to be in the fullness of life to come. He says, so we can be fully patient because we trust His character, because we know His presence, because we know He is active and powerfully working in and through us. And again, I don't know what you're bringing in with you this morning. I don't know all the fullness of the weight of the pain, the uncertainty, the challenges that you are currently facing. But I know that God knows every single piece of it, and He knows every part. And He's inviting us to a space where we don't despair, where we're not overcome by the uncertainty, where we don't give up hope, and where we also do not give in to the challenge to simply strive to grasp control for ourselves and to force our own end in the way that we think it's supposed to be. That He invites us and can actually empower us to do the hard thing of being patient. The capacity to wait for the Lord to do the wonders and the goodness of all that He is producing in and through us. And so James begins in a remarkably unpopular way by encouraging us that we can, in the power and presence of the Spirit, choose patience, even in the midst of uncertainty. And further, he would challenge us that we need to process these things well. We can't use the hard, the painful, the challenging circumstances of our lives to justify bad actions or poor behavior or particularly poor speech. He says to us, don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Again, he's drawing back on what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. We talked about the fact that we are called to not slander or to not speak negatively against one another, to not sit above one another in a sense of judgment or arrogance or superiority. Again, you can imagine how easy it is, especially when you're having a hard time, to give in to some kind of frustration or speaking in an unkind or an unhealthy way, especially when you're challenged or in pain or having a hard time. Again, for example, one of my most epic parenting failures. A number of years ago, our kids were really little. They were like maybe 2 and 4. I had a really rough day at church. It was just a really challenging day. My wife was on shift at the hospital, and so I picked the girls up from the sitter after, got them home, started to get supper ready. And you know what? Maybe it's just me, but have you ever had those moments when you're really at the edge and you're just so done? that your kids seem to push every possible button that you can possibly imagine. Maybe it's just me. Again, they're not actually pushing my buttons more. It's just that I have less patience, and so it seems like they are. And so we got things ready. We started to sit down for supper. Our youngest was just super fussy about everything. She wanted something to drink, so I got a drink together in a sippy cup, put it down in front of her. I'm like, okay, we can get through this meal. And as soon as I gave her the drink, she just lost it. She just threw a huge fit. And I was like, I cannot handle this moment. So I picked up the sippy cup. I turned around and I hurled it. The whole way down our galley kitchen, it hit the sink and just exploded over the cabinets, the walls, absolutely everything. I was like, inside maybe I was a little bit proud that I actually managed to hit the sink. But apart from that, I was overall just really, really frustrated. And so I sat back down and just shoved something in my mouth. Let's get through this meal. And our oldest chimes in a very strong, secure, positive voice saying, Daddy, you need to apologize to my sister. I managed, I think, to grit through my teeth and say something like, why? And she chimes in, because you were cranky. I was like, okay, really, let's be honest. You're right. So I apologized. We talked it through, kind of worked it out, and we moved on with the evening. But again, James would say to us the same thing. James would say, don't use hard, painful, challenging circumstances to justify inappropriate speech or actions or interactions with others around us. We shouldn't use a hard situation to give in to comfort sins to try and make our life better. We shouldn't use it to grumble against the people that God has placed around us, or to simply sit back grumbling and angry, frustrated that things aren't working out as we wish that they would. Because we have the very Spirit of God within us. The Holy Spirit who produces within us love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. The Spirit of God within us who can empower us to do what Jesus called us to do, which is loving even our enemies and forgiving those who wound us. And so James is inviting us to walk through this journey really well, not just to grit our teeth and bear it, not to fling the sippy cup into the edge, but to actually work this out in a really healthy way. And a few verses down, he also challenges us to continue to navigate our speech in a way that is honest and clear. He says, above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no. Otherwise, you'll be condemned. Again, James is not saying that we can't take sort of an honest oath, say in court, although you actually don't need to. In that kind of situation, you could take an attestation if you prefer instead, just for clarification. But what he's really talking about is not using God's name in an unholy or a flippant, kind of frivolous sort of way. Again, not using phrases like, I swear to God, to try to strengthen our sense of resolve in the conversation. The only reason we would ever need to say more than a yes or no is if people don't trust us to follow through on our commitments. And so James is saying, be the kind of people who are holy and honest and authentic, who can simply say yes or no. Because in seasons of trouble, spaces of hardship, trial, frustration, and pain, it stirs up all kinds of things within us. And so many of the things that we've been navigating or been challenging for us, the things that we are working through, will bubble up to the surface. And I find it really challenging personally that James is quite intense on this. He's saying, don't grumble or complain, or you will be judged, and the judge is at the door. Don't continue to swear or to try and prove yourself in an unhealthy way with your words, or you will be condemned. He's not saying when it feels convenient or when you can sum up the willpower you should do this. He's saying this needs to be your ongoing movement and posture in your interactions as you navigate challenging things. And then he gives us some more helpful and encouraging words when he says to us that we can remember the example of those who've gone before. He says, brothers and sisters, and as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Again, when we're looking at a challenging time, a hard, a difficult experience or situation, it's so much easier when we can see that someone has survived the same thing. When we can look to someone else's example and know how did they get through this particular kind of struggle. And so James says to us, remember the prophets. Look at the Old Testament and see all of these people that God sent to proclaim his word and his truth. See how they were treated. People pushed them out and they ostracized them. They didn't listen to them. They resisted them. Some of them they even killed. And all because they were doing the right thing. All because they were choosing to follow God. Remember that in each and every situation, God empowered all of them to faithfully fulfill the calling he had on their life and to bring them safely through into the ultimate end, whatever that looked like. Again, we see here this reminder that James is viewing success as a life lived out fully in obedience to Jesus, following him faithfully all of the way through. James is not viewing success as comfort or security or things coming back to the way that we would like them to be. But he encourages us to remember the example of those who have gone before. He says, have you heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord faithfully brought about? Again, if you've read the story of Job, it's an absolutely heartbreaking story. Job's a guy who is wealthy, he's powerful, he's influential, and in a very short season of time, all of his wealth is taken or stolen or destroyed. All of his children are killed. His own body is consumed by all kinds of painful and awful and agonizing sores. In his conversations with his wife, she's just really frustrated and not supportive in any way, shape, or form. His friends come around him to comfort him, and they do that for a little bit. But then for like 30-some chapters of the book, they heap condemnation on him over and over again, telling him that it's his sin that created this problem. And if he would just ask for God's forgiveness, everything would be fine. And in the end, God shows up. He vindicates Job. He restores all the things that were lost. He brings a new season, a whole new kind of life into Job's experience. And best of all, Job gets to see and to know and to delight in the presence of God in a way he'd never experienced before. And stories like Job's remind us that the hard, the challenging, the painful experiences of our lives do not have to be the end. We can actually come out stronger. We can come out more whole. We can come out more complete on the other side. Again, when we go through a challenging time, there are so often these voices inside of us that would say something like, you cannot survive this moment. This is going to destroy you. You'll be so diminished or so much less on the other end of this. But stories like Job's remind us this is simply not true. As we lean into the presence of God, he can strengthen us and refresh us and renew us and empower us to walk these things through so differently. Have you ever seen someone in your life do that? Maybe a parent or a child, a sibling or a friend, someone that you know in a relationship with Jesus, or maybe someone that you've read about a long time ago who is just able to journey through the challenges of life in a way that drew them closer to God, in a way that made them so much more whole. I remember a number of years ago in a previous church, there was a guy who had been diagnosed with cancer in his late 40s, and it was going fast. I could see him just diminishing in front of me week by week. And one Sunday morning, I was there a bit early, he was there early, and we sat down and talked together. He looked at me and said, you'll never believe this, but cancer is the best thing that ever happened to me. And I looked at him and I thought, I can see you dying in front of me. I know your wife left you last week because she can't handle the pressure. I know you're trying to navigate parenting, your health, and maintaining the financial life of your family. And he just paused for a moment and said, this brought me to Jesus. Before I kind of was following him, but now he is so very near. This is the best thing that ever happened to me. I remember a few months later sitting in his funeral, and those words came back to me. This reminder that the presence of Jesus is the most precious thing that any of us could ever know. And that even through the challenges, the pain, the trials, the hard circumstances and situations of our lives, we can experience him in a fresh and in a new way, in a way that actually makes us more whole instead of less. And then James draws our eyes all over again to the character of God. He says, the Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Again, I think that we can only patiently endure and navigate the hard, the challenging, the painful circumstances of life. We can only do this well if we are convinced about what the character of God is like. If we view God as hard or cold or indifferent or up there frustrated or somehow up there trying to smite us and knock us down over and over again, we will not handle challenges well. We'll try to grasp for control. We'll try to force and navigate our way through in all kinds of unhealthy ways. because there's no one and there's nothing to really trust in. But when we know the truth of this passage, literally that God himself is full of compassion and mercy, we know the truth that either here or in the fullness of the life to come, everything is going to be set right. Everything will be made complete. And even in the day-to-day harshness, the pain, the reality, all the uncertainty that we are facing, we can look to him moment by moment for the grace and the courage and the strength and the capacity to walk these things out well. Because he is merciful and he is compassionate. And his longing and desire for us, even more than our desire for our own lives, is that he would pour himself into us in a way that would strengthen us and enable us to do this journey faithfully and to do this well. And so today, what are the spaces where you're navigating this? What are the challenging moments? What are the painful things? Again, I want to give us just a couple practical ways that we maybe could navigate this in a more helpful way. Again, if you're in a season where you're just feeling overwhelmed with despair, where you feel like you are losing hope, or if you're in that space where you're frantically grasping for control, trying to find some way out of a hard or a painful season, maybe a really good discipline is to memorize passages like this one and to recite them to yourself maybe every day. This beautiful invitation to be patient, to trust in the goodness and the wonder and the presence of God, that he is with you and will continue to be so. Maybe if you're in a season where you just feel overwhelmingly lonely and you feel unsure, how do I really navigate these challenges? Maybe you need to follow James' advice and consider the prophets. Maybe this week just go back and read a whole bunch of those stories of the amazing ways that God strengthened and empowered the prophets to come through all kinds of hardness. And don't just read them as if they were some sort of cardboard figure or someone on the flannel graph board that got moved along. But think, how would I feel in those circumstances? How would I navigate this? How do they deal with all the range of their emotions and their uncertainty? Or maybe read some great biographies of other Christians that have gone before us and see how God strengthened and empowered them. Again, maybe today this is the challenge to navigate what are the unholy or unhealthy ways that you're navigating your pain. Are you giving in to comfort sins? Are you finding that you are grumbling against those around you, or maybe even against God? Maybe it's time to spend some time with him processing out how to deal with these things differently. And maybe for so many of us, the most important thing that maybe we could do today is to simply spend some time considering and reflecting on the goodness and the character of God, that he is full of compassion and mercy, that his presence is absolutely everywhere, and that none of the pain or hardship or uncertainty of this life will ever be wasted. But in the fullness of his presence, he will bring it all together exactly as it ought to be. And that we can trust him, even when the journey twists and turns in ways that we never imagined. So let's just spend a few minutes now. Again, whatever those things are that come to your mind when I say, what are the challenges, the pains, the uncertainties that you're facing? Just spend a few moments and just offer these things to God now. And if you are able, maybe just take a few moments and say, God, I choose to trust you. I choose to believe that you are enough to handle this. And then just spend a minute with God considering what's the next natural step that you need to take. Again, is this memorizing a passage like this and reciting it to focus on the gift that God is inviting you into to be patient with Him? Is this about the way that you're processing things in an unhealthy way? Is it an invitation to explore more the stories of people who've navigated challenges and pursued them really well? Is it a calling to just sit patiently and dwell on the wonder of who God is and allow the truth of His character to form and to shape you through the journey? Or is it something else that He's laying on your heart and mind?